The Return of Obinna. It was an ordinary Tuesday, the kind of day that begins with a rooster, a soft breeze, and the smell of ground pepper from a neighbor's kitchen. Adaeze had woken early, as usual. She'd swept the compound, opened the windows of her little shop, and tied her wrapper with the quiet pride of a woman who had built her own world. She was sewing a yellow blouse, the exact shade of sunlight after rain. Outside, the village passed by slowly, a boy chasing a goat, a woman balancing plantains on her head, and the rhythm of distant laughter. She hummed to herself, needle in hand, when the door creaked. She didn't look up right away. Customers came and went. Some waited, some walked in without greeting. But then, the silence spoke. Not the usual quiet, not shyness, not hesitation. It was heavier, like memory, like breath caught in the throat. She looked up, and there, he stood. Obinna. But not the boy she had once loved, not the man with sawdust in his hair and a cocky grin. This man was older, leaner. His eyes were sunken, tired, his beard patchy with gray. He wore a faded shirt with frayed cuffs, and he leaned slightly, favoring one leg, a limp in his step. Adaeze's hands dropped the blouse to the floor. Her heart stopped. They stared at each other. Seconds passed like lifetimes. She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. He took one slow step into the shop. "Adaeze," he said, voice like dry Harmattan wind, low and worn. She blinked, as if confirming it wasn't a ghost, as if her dreams hadn't played this exact scene hundreds of times, but never like this. What are you doing here?" she finally asked. He smiled, barely. "I came home." Her knees nearly buckled, but she didn't cry. Not yet. He sat on the edge of a low stool, same one she used for children's fittings. His hands trembled slightly. The skin around his knuckles was cracked. "I wanted to come back earlier," he began, "but life swallowed me whole." She stood frozen, her back straight, chin high, but her fingers, they shook. "Where have you been?" she whispered. "It's been over 20 years. He looked down, and then the story poured. He had left with hope, with a promise, with dreams taller than the Lagos skyline. But the cousin who promised him a job was a liar. The carpentry contract never existed. Obinna was lured into petty jobs, then caught up in a fight he didn't start. A stolen generator, a raid, police sirens. He was thrown into jail. No trial, no call home. He stayed there for 3 years. When he got out, he was broken, both in body and in name. He tried to write to her. "I wrote so many letters," he said, "but I didn't even know if you still lived here, if you would want to hear from me." She said nothing. He swallowed. "So I stayed away. I worked odd jobs." She said nothing. He swallowed. "So I stayed away. I worked odd jobs, slept in church compounds. I almost married, but I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw you." A tear slipped from her eye, quietly, as if asking permission. He saw it, and his voice cracked. "I am not here to beg," he said. "I don't deserve even your tears. I just needed to see you. Once." She walked toward the window. The same light that once fell on their hands when he gave her that silver ring now bathed the room again. But they were different people. Older, wounded, weathered. "You left," she said finally, voice calm but full. "And I waited. For years. People laughed at me. My mother cried. Suitors came and left. I held on to your name like a rope." He lowered his head. "I know." "No," she continued, stronger now. "You don't know. You don't know the nights I slept beside a dress I never wore. You don't know how I searched faces in the market, hoping to find yours. You don't know the ache of watching your youth go by, waiting for a ghost." Silence. Then she turned to him. "But you're not a ghost." She walked closer. His eyes welled up. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small, wrapped in cloth. Unfolded slowly. It was the silver ring. Tarnished, bent, but whole. "I kept it," he said. "Even when I lost everything. I kept this." She looked at it. And for the first time in a long time, she smiled. It wasn't a smile of love, not yet. but it was the smile of a heart that had survived. "Do you still love me?" he asked softly. She paused. "I don't know." He nodded. "That's fair." She walked back to her sewing table, picked up the yellow blouse, dusted it gently, folded it, then looked at him again. "You need a place to stay?" His eyes widened. "Yes," he breathed. "Yes, but I can—" "You'll stay in the small back room. Same place where my father kept the yam barn." He chuckled. The sound cracked, but familiar. She added, "You'll eat what I eat. You'll do market runs, and you won't bring shame into this house." He nodded quickly. "I won't." She handed him a cup of water. As he drank, she watched him closely. Not the boy she remembered, but maybe the man she had waited for, or maybe just a man who needed to start again. And she could understand that, because once she had needed to start again too. And so, Obinna returned. Not with fanfare, not with promises, but with truth and trembling hands. And for Adaeze, that was enough. For now. Obinna stayed, not as a lover, not as a husband, not yet, but as a presence, steady, awkward, and gentle. He took the small back room behind the shop, the one with a leaky roof and cracked window. He fixed it himself with quiet hands and borrowed tools. Each morning he rose early and swept the compound. He fetched water before Adaeze opened her eyes. He never asked for more. He never overstepped. And Adaeze watched him. At first, she said little. They moved like two shadows learning to share the same light. She would stitch inside, he would clean outside. She would cook, he would serve. When they crossed paths, they would nod, sometimes smile. The silence between them wasn't cold, just cautious, like two wounds trying not to reopen. But one evening, after the sun had dipped below the orange trees and the crickets began to sing, she invited him to sit. Not inside, but by the mango tree, where it all began. He sat on the old wooden stool, she on the low bench beside him. The moon was rising slowly, pale and tired, just like them. "Tell me everything," Adaeze said, her voice firm but soft. Obinna sighed. "I've told you some." She turned to him. "Not enough." He began. He spoke of the betrayal, how his cousin had used him, stolen his ID, and made him sign fake documents without knowing. How the police came one night, and he was dragged into a truck like a common thief. He was locked in a cell with 10 other men. No space to lie down, no clean water, just noise, heat, hunger. "I begged them," he said, "for phone call, for trial, for anything, but nobody listened." 3 years. 3 years in the dark. He scratched the scars on his wrist, faint but still angry. "I fought to stay alive," he whispered. "I fought to remember your name." She blinked, holding her breath. "When I got out," he continued, "I tried to find my cousin. He vanished. I had no money, no clothes, just shame. I couldn't face anyone." He looked at her now. "I thought you deserved better. I thought you moved on. That maybe you had children, a life, joy. I didn't want to ruin what you rebuilt." Adaeze didn't interrupt. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a tiny notebook, weathered, stained, pages curled. Inside were scribbles, sketches of her face. Words like, "She wore yellow today. Does she still laugh in her sleep? Forgive me, Adaeze. I am still yours, even if I'm far." She took the notebook slowly, touched its pages like one touches memory. Then, she began to cry. Not loud, not wild, but silent, steady tears. He reached out, slowly, unsure. She let him hold her hand. "I waited," she said, her voice cracking. "I waited so long I forgot what I was waiting for." I know," he replied, "and I don't deserve your forgiveness." Then she whispered, "I already gave it." They sat there for what felt like hours, not as lovers, but as two people holding truth, heavy, sacred, and unfinished. Days passed. He spoke more, about the small carpentry work he did for churches in Lagos, how he sometimes slept in empty classrooms, how he watched other men hold their children and wondered what might have been. Adaeze listened. She shared too. How her mother had begged her to remarry. How her father once gave her a spool of pink thread and told her to sew her own joy. How she had almost buried the silver ring in the ground one night, but couldn't. Their conversations grew longer. They laughed sometimes, at old memories, at village gossip, at how love had aged them. She would catch him staring, not at her body, not at her face, but at her spirit. Like someone looking at fire from a distance, afraid to touch. One evening, as she adjusted a dress form in the shop, he walked in holding a wooden box. "I made this for you," he said. She opened it. Inside was a miniature sewing table, carved by hand, delicate, precise. And on it, a tiny figure of a woman holding a needle. "It's you," he said. "The woman who stitched her life together." She didn't speak, just stared, then hugged the box to her chest. No one had ever captured her like that before. That night, she prayed. For the first time in a long time, she spoke to God with her full voice. Not begging for return, not asking for signs, just gratitude. For answers that didn't come the way she expected. For love that limped its way home. Adaeze didn't say "I love you." Not yet. But she began sewing a new wrapper, deep blue with gold trim. She didn't know if it was for a wedding, but she knew it was for a beginning. And sometimes beginnings are enough. It had been weeks since Obinna returned. Weeks of shared glances, long silences, gentle kindnesses. He never forced words, he never pushed for more. He simply stayed. But Adaeze, she had not made peace, not fully, not yet. It was the rain that woke her that night. Soft, persistent, tapping gently on the tin roof like a child seeking attention. The kind of rain that brings thoughts with it, heavy ones. She sat by the window, wrapped in an old night wrapper, the silver ring in her palm again, the very one he had returned to her. She hadn't worn it. She hadn't returned it either. She just held it, turning it over, and over. The moon hung low, pale and full, like a question with no answer. Outside, she could see the faint glow of lanterns. Obinna's room was quiet. His lamp had gone out early, but sleep had run far from her. Inside her chest was a war, soft but fierce. Her mind pulled at both ends. One side whispered, "He left you. He vanished. You cried into your pillow for 10 years. You built yourself from ash, alone." The other side whispered too. "He returned. He told the truth. He was broken, not wicked. His hands shake because he still loves you." She wiped her tears with the hem of her wrapper. She whispered aloud, "Why now?" The room answered only with the sound of the rain. She got up and paced. Her feet knew this floor like a dance. The sewing table, the calendar, the shelf of thread and fabric, her life, all in this room. Everything had a place, but her heart, it didn't. She thought of what her mother would say. "Don't look back, Adaeze. Yesterday does not feed tomorrow." She thought of Papa and his quiet voice. "Walk. Just make sure you're walking." She thought of Obinna, his eyes, how they softened when he looked at her, the way he swept the compound before she rose, the way he left warm tea outside her door without asking if she wanted any. But also, the years, the absence, the silence that almost killed her. She walked to her mirror, touched her face. There were faint lines now, not old, but not the girl she once was. She didn't recognize the young bride who once sat under a mango tree with stars in her eyes. She had become a woman who knew pain and survived it. And so she asked herself for the first time, if I let him back into my heart, will I lose everything I became without him? She sat again, her legs tucked under her, the rain still whispering its hymn outside. She held the ring to her chest and breathed. Then, a sound. A knock, soft. 3 taps on her door. She froze. "Adaeze," came his voice, barely above a whisper. "I didn't mean to wake you," he said. I heard movement. Are you all right?" She couldn't answer. He hesitated, then said, "I'll go back. Just wanted to know, you're not alone." She stood behind the door, hand on the wood, tears running freely now. "I'm not ready," she whispered. There was silence. Then he replied, just as softly, "I'll wait." She slid down the door and cried like she hadn't in years. Not because she was sad, not because she was in love, but because she realized something terrifying and beautiful at once. She didn't have to be ready to be loved. She could just be broken, healing, whole, unsure, still worthy. The rain softened. Morning came gently. Birds began to sing again. And Adaeze, still sitting on the floor, still holding the ring, finally smiled. Not because the war was over, but because she had stopped fighting herself. And that, too, is a kind of victory. The sun rose differently that day, gentler, softer, as if the sky itself knew that something was shifting in Adaeze's life. She opened her windows slowly, the scent of early dew and hibiscus flowers greeting her like a long-lost friend. Obinna was already outside, sweeping as usual. But this time, when their eyes met, something passed between them. Not romance, not regret, but a quiet understanding. Today was not like the others. A few weeks had passed since the night she broke down behind the door, the night he knocked and she cried without shame. She still hadn't said yes, but she had stopped saying no. They spoke more now. They laughed. She let him sit beside her while she sewed. He helped her cut patterns, fetch water, even deliver finished clothes to clients in the next village. Obinna never pushed. He never even brought up the word marriage again. But one morning, while drinking tea, he said, "If I were to love again, I'd start with you." She smiled and replied, "If I were to trust again, I might begin with you." And that was enough. Words spread in the village, whispers became nods became smiles. One market woman was heard saying, "If Adaeze is smiling this much these days, something sweet must be in the pot." Even Mama Nkechi, who once called her cursed, brought a gift basket and said, "It's never too late to be seen." And so they began planning. Quietly, humbly, just a gathering. Not a wedding in the grand sense, but a Thanksgiving. A celebration of love that had been buried but not dead. They chose the backyard, under the large tree, the same one where it all began, with a handmade ring. Adaeze wore a deep royal blue gown, one she stitched herself, embroidered with gold threads in the shape of vines and flowers. Obinna wore a simple cream native shirt with clean lines, and a new walking stick carved from mahogany, a gift from Adaeze's father. There were no fancy chairs, no loud music, just friends, family, laughter, and sunlight. Papa gave a short speech. His voice cracked once, but he finished strong. Some flowers bloom early, some take their time, but when they open, they are worth the wait. Mama couldn't stop wiping her eyes. "Don't mind me," she told guests. "Na joy day leak from my eyes." Obinna stood before Adaeze, his hands shaking slightly. He pulled the silver ring from his pocket again, cleaned, reshaped, polished. He held it up. But before he could speak, she touched his hand. "Don't promise me anything," she said gently. "Just stay." He nodded, eyes moist. "I'm not here to finish what we started. I'm here to begin something new." The ring slid onto her finger once more, but it felt different this time. Not a symbol of youth and dreams, but of endurance, of healing, of choosing each other again, despite the broken years. The food was simple: jollof rice, fried plantain, egusi soup. The laughter was rich. The village drummers came on their own, no invitation. They said they just felt led to rejoice. Children danced. Old women sang songs from their childhood. Obinna and Adaeze sat side by side on a wooden bench under the tree, watching it all. As the sun began to set, he turned to her. "Do you ever regret waiting?" She was quiet for a long time. Then she whispered, "I don't regret waiting. I only regret not living while I did." He nodded, then said, "Let's live now." And so they did. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. They didn't try to rewrite the past. They built something new, in between sowing and sweeping, praying and planting. They didn't chase perfection. They chose peace. Sometimes, Adaeze would still sit by the window at night, not to wait, just to remember. And sometimes, Obinna would join her, their fingers interlocked, not needing words. Because love, at its best, is not loud. It is steady. And that's how the woman who waited 20 years finally came home. Not to a man, but to herself. If you were with this far, God bless you. And if you haven't hit the subscribe button, do so. Enjoy unlimited African folktales with great lessons. Goodbye.